I'm Joanne Gabbin from Virginia, and I am a Bocas virgin. My first time. And I'm enjoying it. And I found another home. And I want to tell you that my family is here. They're out there in the audience. Lauren Alleyne's mother and father and great aunt and brother and sister-in-law and best friend. We have populated the audience. It's amazing to be in this space because it's my first time in Trinidad, and to come to this August assemblage of lovers of literature and especially poetry. I have the good fortune to introduce to you two wonderful poets. One I know very well because she is now the assistant director of the Furious Flower Poetry Center. And the other one I just met last night, but I knew him through his work. First, I will introduce Lauren Alleyne. She is the author of two books. First, Difficult Fruit, and the second book that is now at press, and it is called Honeyfish. She holds an MFA in poetry from Cornell University and an MA in English from Iowa State University. She has written fiction, nonfiction, and of course, poetry. She has won many, many awards. But I want to tell you that she wowed me because almost as soon as she came to James Madison University, she got an award where a university named a prize after her, Difficult Fruit. And I said, wow, did I choose the right person? You know, sometimes when you're doing these interviews, you don't know. You miss some people. You miss some very good people in the process. But I didn't miss her. And it's like having a wonderful relative, like a little sister. I could say like having a daughter, because I'm getting older with me. I always am so interested when I meet in person famous poets. This man has six books. And he is also born in Trinidad. He shuttles between New York, Brooklyn, and Trinidad. He has taught at Bronx Community College, the New School, the Young Adult Learning Academy, and also in the New York Public Schools. He is the author of, as I said, 6 books, including No Back Door, which received the Patterson Award for Literary Excellence, the book, The Waving Gallery, and most recently, the book that he's holding, Voices Carry. Derek Walcott calls Mervyn Taylor's poetry honest. He also said, Taylor's voice is a quiet voice. His poems possess an admirable degree of subtlety and a tone that keeps him separate and unique. I would say of him, after reading 3 of his poetry books, that his poetic sensibility is colored by a nuance, pathos, and humor. He is truly a poet also of place. He describes himself in a way poetically, a poet from a hot place, his writing pulling the world close like a globe on the kitchen table. I have a way of introducing poets when I do it as a part of Furious Flower. I take in their essence in a haiku. And so I created a haiku for Lauren and one for Mervyn. So Lauren will come up first. She's the youngest. And so I bring her up with this haiku. Her mind migrates far, yet returns to island spaces with a soupy sky. Haiku for Lauren. Haiku for Mervyn. He drinks in landscape, relishes the taste of it, returns for a sip. Won't you welcome Lauren Alleyne?
Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Thank you, Bocas, for having us. I was very excited and insistent to my boss, which is, always a risk, but we must go to Bocas. We must go to, and I said it for a whole year, and it worked. She's having a wonderful time, and I feel really proud that this is a festival that's happening here in Trinidad, a place that I'm proudly from. I'm going to read a couple of poems from Difficult Fruit, which is the first book that Joanne referenced, and then a couple from the upcoming book, Honeyfish, but I already said I'm not reading too much from Honeyfish because I want Bocas to bring me back when it come out next year. So, but also we're thinking about time. I forgot my phone, will you keep me? Okay. This poem is, so in this book I write a lot of poems to myself at different ages. Hey, Sam. And this one is 14. I didn't have a favorite poem in this book until I read with Jamaica Kincaid, and she said it was her favorite poem, ergo it is now my favorite poem. 14. Oh, and the other preface is, just remember being what 14 was like. That's really what this poem is. How the bud yearns to flower, believing that bloom is all beauty, perfuming the bliss of pluck. How she knows nothing of uprooting, the constraints of glass, the burden of perpetual brightening. When she blossoms in her dreams, she is only the full rose of herself, free at last from the inconvenient root. How she strains against her greenness, prays for the day a hand will lift her away, ah, rose. Let us not tell her of wither. Let her turn her best face to the sky. Fast, that's what they call that. Thank you. I very carefully marked the poems I was going to read, and now I can't find the paper. Okay, the next poem I read is another age poem. This is 7, and the story behind it is funny. My First Communion album fell on my head as I was packing to go to a residency, and so I took it with me, and it's the first poem actually that sort of sparked the sequence of writing to a younger self, because there was a photo. I was trying to figure out what my face was doing. I don't have an answer, but I have a poem. 7. In this picture, your dress is burning white. Your veil engulfs your head like lacy flames. Your Snoopy watch flares red on your wrist. You clutch your white handbag like a wish. Little Christ bride, you are innocence embodied down to your white knee socks, Mary Janes, and unpierced ears. Your parents are stiff with pride, their afros not yet streaked white with worry. Behind you, your godmothers hold fast to their vows, and your shoulders, Nanny George alive and beaming, Auntie Patsy whispering into your ear, real as the statue of Mary in the background. Everything in this moment is true, 7. But even truth is not impervious to time, and we lose so much. Even this day's memories will thin and disappear. But perhaps you already sense this, the anticipation already giving way to something else you cannot name, as you solemnly wait to be captured, bending your smile into the camera's light. One of the themes running through the new collection is just thinking about, I think, some of the topic of this panel, which is leaving, journey, migration. And it started really being a force in the poetry when I left Trinidad when I was 18. And then when I was 36, I realized I have been away as long as I was ever here, and what was that meaning? And so just kind of trying to think about that. This poem is written in a form called a villanelle, which I love. I love writing in form. And this villanelle is called a visa villanelle, because, you know. First, the gathering of proof, your life's story reduced to a paper jam of required documents, evidence of the right shape of your history. Surrender every expectation of privacy. Release the statements. Provide your fingerprints. Prove you have nothing to hide. Your life's story, unremarkable in its mundane trajectory of dream, desire, struggle, overcoming. Testament to the harmless shape of your history. Leave home at midnight. Drive through the wee hours to arrive at the embassy door first with your gathered proof, your rehearsed story. Stand in the chilled, street-lit dark. Pray the rosary. Repeat again and again to still your heavy beating heart. You have all the evidence, all the right forms. This is just a footnote in your history. Dawn. Sunlight opens the day like a key. Wipe the weary from your eyes. Enter. State your intent. Offer the proof of your life. Tell its story. Provide evidence. Give it the shape that will become your history. I wasn't going to read this poem, but not everybody understands, I think, what it is to migrate, what it is to leave a place and to arrive at another place. And certainly the privilege of mobility is not something granted to everybody who does not have a US passport or a British passport or Canadian passport. And that was something I was trying to explain to a friend, and it became a poem, and in which I compared, especially around the dialogue of immigration in the States right now. And this is an old poem, so this is not a new conversation, but it imagines both sides of a border and how privilege informs what happens on either side of that. On the bridge of a border between two countries, imagine, if you will, the checkpoint, the guards in their khakis and hats, their dull plastic buttons. Imagine the traveler. Perhaps it is you in the other life you always imagined, a grungy backpack and long hair, nothing but an itch to drag your boots on someone else's dust. Shake it all off. No shitty job, whiny children, no nagging girlfriend hinting about diamonds and commitment, no envelopes with their hungry windows grinning your name. When the guard beckons, you show him your crisp blue passport. He calls you sir and stamps it without a thought. Freedom is a bridge solid beneath your feet. It is the new country opening to you like a blank check. You grab it, you run. Imagine the other side. The throngs lined up since dawn, the women shushing kids who fidget in their best shirts, the men with earnest eyes. Let's make you one of them, just for fun. You have a letter from a cousin saying, come, and your whole savings strapped to your stomach like a skin. You have nothing to declare, you tell the man, scrutinizing your face, overlaying the image onto the paper he holds up close to his face. You notice his veined white fingers, so different than your own, stumpy and spider brown. You clutch the bright cloth bag holding all the reasons you are here, but small enough for the week-long trip the letter says you are taking. Your wife and children smile, unblinking in the Polaroid zipped into a pocket you hoped won't be searched, lest you betray your grief. You kissed them, each one this morning, promised to write, but first this. Answer the God's questions steadily, as though nothing is at stake. Where you're headed when you cross that bridge, and when you plan on coming back. I'm going to read two more poems because of the constituency of the audience. Father Christmas. You bought us the tree, a real one, packed the pine into a bucket of dirt, lay newspapers to catch the needles, turned the tree this way and that until it bristled, showed its fullest side. You hummed and kept one eye on the news as we sang carols and argued over the perfect placement of candy canes and lights. You lifted us, too small then, to the top of the tree, the silver star gleaming in our hands. Christmas morning, you waved us to church, and we returned to a feast-laden table, the bread you slow kneaded, the ham steaming pink, chow-chow laced with heat, again hungry. How we devoured your love, hungry as only children are, we who knew so little of the price of such sweetness. The full belly, the brightly wrapped boxes of expectation, the laughter gurgling over the surface of next month's bills, the prayers for grace. We only ever wanted more. Shout out to my daddy. And blue. The instant you put your head into the water, your mother's voice bells in your skull, don't go get on while in the water. They say at 32 you begin to become your mother, and not a week past that birthday, her admonition pulls your body back from a juicy plunge into the Aegean seductive blue. In your childhood, she refused permission to any outing that involved water. You think you a fish, she'd say, and my heart can't handle bad news. A woman now, you know the force she feared, the way water can draw you out, how easy it is to go and never miss the earth beneath your feet until you need it, how sometimes it gives you no way back. You dive in anyway, the way she always has, head first and with a whoop of glee. You know, too, what she loved about the sea, how it is impossible to be burdened in it, how it can strip the body down to its purest, most joyful self. She knew the salt kiss cravings in you. When you have to go, I will take you. You swim out now, her voice looped around you like a lifesaver. There's nowhere you can go that it will not find you.
Mom and Daddy, how'd you like that? Loved it, loved it. Oh my God. Mervyn Taylor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
You know, we used to clap whenever we landed, to cheer as the plane shuddered to a stop. Now our minds are too busy mapping the route from airport to home, the many places where things could go wrong, the gifts, the personal items in the suitcase stolen. Coming in from outposts in Amsterdam, London, New York, we've grown old on such flights, undecided at which end we should linger, which death might be better, in snow or one where the heat cooks us till we're done like everything the sun blazes down on, the tar, the sea, the sand, making that funny noise of satisfaction and regret of fires flaring and fires going out. So we come back, we went away for 4 years and we end up staying 54. So we come back and we have new names. Pop, fathers, uncle. These are my new names, given me by complete strangers. Suddenly I'm related to the young man who moves over in the taxi, to the girl clerking in the hardware store who asks, "Uncle, you're getting through?" I suppose I am. I've come through crowded Port of Spain, misjudged the high pavement at the last minute, writing myself. I've managed to remember where the taxi stand is, patiently waiting till I hear, "Belmont, fathers?" I look for the priest who must have been put out from the cathedral, which is under reconstruction. I look for his cleric collar. How do all these people think me family? From the tall-hatted Rasta smoking his cheroot to the Indian who shaved fins from the sliced carrot in my bag. In what way do we all resemble? I take the seatbelt the woman in the back seat is shaking to remind me, "Buckle up, Daddy." I snap it in and catch a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. She is at least as old as I am. I'm tempted to say, "Thank you, daughter." But I say, "Thank you, dear. Thank you." It's a poem for that woman who died here, sadly, the Japanese girl, Asama Nagakia, and they still have not found who's done that. Interesting story. I talked to some students at Belmont Secondary on Wednesday, and one of the young people in that class said, "I knew her well. As a matter of fact, I have her headpiece in my bedroom." I say, "Boy." And then she says to me, "You know they closed the case, right?" How do you close a case? You haven't found the person. Can't close it. A kind of Valentine, because of the time of year that it happened. The hum of traffic goes unbroken round the savannah, a couple waiting forever to cross by All Saints. The seat near St. Anne's is still missing half its back from the time a car jumped the curb, killing two. I think of where we would walk if you came to visit, what you would say in the middle of the flowering Puy about the murdered girl whose body was found here, the pans playing holy songs, not like anything arranged for the carnival that so went to a man's head he tried to hide her among the yellow blossoms. I will walk you around this savannah because we've always boasted of its beauty, because it's where all our love and all our craziness take place, where our horses have raced and our rapists, greased to the belly, have crawled and come upon careless couples. I will show you where not to go at night, but I cannot help during the day when it is bright and 100,000 people offer invites, and behind the mask, men are not always who they say they are. It's a poem for my brother. Well, I'll tell you the rest later, but this is for my brother, the birthday boy. My brother's in his 90s now, and I'm thinking, should I continue our $100 exchange this year, Me sending him one in late August, he in December sending it back broken into 20s. Why bother, I'm saying? I could just get a bottle of rum and head out to Queens, although lately he has to hide to take a drink, since that bout with gout, his wife keeping an eye on him, her pacemaker forcing him to go easy. What about a hat, I consider, though he hardly goes anywhere now and doesn't fuss much about how he looks. In the picture on my dresser, people who come over think he's a movie star, a black Paul Newman, I kid you not. It was taken back when he was an upcoming light heavyweight. His girlfriend Lucille was a beauty with a whispery voice you had to come close to hear, and doing so, you'd catch a whiff of that perfume. Come to think of it, what could I get for him that's better than what he's had already? I confess, I followed them one night just to see where you'd take a lady like that. Lucky guy. Okay. This is actually an old poem, but it found its way into this book. And it's one of those poems you do almost like a eulogy. Somebody dies. And, you know, the problem is if you get into the habit of reading poems at people's funerals, you become a kind of a death poet, you know. Every time somebody dies, they say, you're going to read something, right? I say, well. So this poem kind of started out that tradition. Where do they go? And you know the expression that before they die, they're traveling. We have no idea. We just come up with these words to describe stuff. We don't know what's going on. We say they're traveling. We make that up. We don't know what they're doing. Where do they go for Elva and Nola? When we say those near death are traveling, what does it mean? When they say they want to go, where do they want to be taken? Home to a gallery in Tanapuna, listening to the grandchildren of the neighbors who are so glad for the things from America. Or home to Linden Boulevard, cars flying like crazy on the way to Kennedy. Or home to heaven, a place like Santa Cruz where they say even snow is possible. What do they mean when they say they're ready and begin rolling from side to side? Why do they start cussing late in life? They who never used profanity before, who were so gentle and giving, they took in other people's children and made us sleep on the floor. Where do they go once they cross 90 and wear that smile as though they can see someone who went before, pointing and showing the way, when they say, goodbye, when you miss me, I gone. You know how it is. I'm going to read a poem about a guy who is in trouble, a black man who has finally found himself in real trouble. But I don't know of any black man in America or in this world who is not in some kind of trouble. It's called Lake What's Its Name. Cosby told a joke once about diving somewhere upstate in late spring into a lake that looked warm. With trembling voice, he called to his wife, come on in, the water's fine. I still smile, picturing her face, wondering if it was true or if he had made up the whole trip, the sun glinting off the lake surface, the water colludingly calm, inviting. I see her shake her head, back away toward the car, hugging her shoulders as if to say, that's all right, no, thank you. One early June at Jones Beach, you encouraged me in the same way to jump in, though there was a definite chill in the air and only one other, a He-Man in Speedos, splashed around. You shivered as you beckoned, come, come. I look at Bill these days, his face drawn, his trials taking their toll. It's hard to laugh, thinking of how very convincing he was, how warm he made the water seem. So I have time to read maybe one more? One more? Oh Lord, that's terrible. Two more is good, two more is good. It's a poem I promised, it's called The Singer, and I don't think the lady is here, but I'm going to read it anyway. The Singer for Mary Murrell. She was known to make the rafters in the cathedral ring after her Ave Maria, the audience sitting stunned. But that was before the Sunday her house burned down and she had to be rescued, after which she could hardly talk, much less sing. And later, when her voice returned, it was nowhere close to what it once had been. Now, whenever she tried to reach the octave that used to thrill the congregation, her throat closes, and halfway to heaven, something like smoke clouds the beautiful aria. All right, so you say one more. It's hard, right? It's hard. Okay. Two short ones. Very short. Very short. Very short. Very short. One, okay. Simple one. Vendors. From the top of Charlotte down to the bottom, I love when they say, lover. Lover, what you taking today? You need some pumpkin for that soup and some Eddos. They can hear the puka puka before you even put it on. But the one who causes me to smile all the way home sits at the northeast corner of Prince, gap-legged beside her tray of bright red, claiming things nice now that she and the tomato man make back. Thank you.
You see why we love poetry. Oh my. Now, we're supposed to talk about the challenges and responsibilities of a poet, an immigrant poet, who finds herself abroad during the age of Trump. Now let me tell you, I was born there, and I must tell you, it is a difficult place right about now. This man who promised walls, this man who planned to unleash hatred and violence in our country, it's all there. It's become a reality. And Alleyne was in my office just 3 months, less than 3 months after Trump was elected. I remember vividly the morning of November the 9th, when we found out that he was indeed the president. And it took me and a friend in the office 2 or 3 hours just to calm her down. Now, she remembers this vividly, but I think that was the only honest way for me to begin this. The earth tilted. And for her, it was a different experience than for me. And I just want her to express that feeling that she had as succinctly as she can. And then I'd like Mervyn to tell us where he was that time and what he felt as someone who was born in Trinidad, but has been in the United States for more than 45 years.
Oh God, John. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yep. Hello?
It's on? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was a little incoherent. I think there were a couple of things. First of all, I think whether consciously or not, we have an image of what America means. And, you know, I watch enough TV. And I think as much as I could have, I felt the wave of what was coming. The fact that the American people were so willing to give over what the fundamentals of their democracy looked like to somebody like that, I was in shock. And but the other thing I think that's there is there's always a sense of precariousness as a non-citizen, right? You know, the burden of proof that you have from the moment you stand up the road to get your visa through and through. I mean, part of what I think helps as an immigrant person is the excellence. You know, you have to be the best. They can take your job at any moment when you have an H-1B visa because you have to be the best person in your field. You have to be the best this, the best that. And so having done all of that for so many years, and like I talked about before, experiencing that tip here, now I'm here, you know, this is the place I've chosen to live, and then it turned out to be a crazy place after all of that. You know, it's like, when you're born here, that's like if you have a crazy brother or a crazy mother, you're like, well, that's mine. When you marry it, or at least you engage, we didn't put the ring on it yet, you really have to reconsider. It's like, okay, am I really going to do this? Am I going to hitch my wagon to this crazy show right here? So a lot of it was that. A lot of it was that anxiety of the instability of, you know, finally I have the perfect job, finally I'm happy, now this fool. You know, so I think that was a lot of it, and just the distress of what I knew was about to come.
Yep. Can you hear me on this? Mm-hmm. Okay. It's strange, right, that this man comes along, and I don't know, I have the strange feeling that he's a man whose time has come. Mm. In other words, we know things now about America that we did not know before. Things have been uncovered. Mm. While there was a lot of pretense about how wonderful and so on and how accommodating everybody is, we find out now that it's not true. People are coming out of the woodwork, and things are, feelings and attitudes that you did not know exist, even among people that you thought were liberal, and so on, right? Just to jump forward a little bit, he plans this wall, as you know. He's been talking about this incredible wall, and it's going to be built right around in Arizona, through Indian land, right? Into where these people have their ancestral burying grounds and so on, right? And this is interesting. A friend of mine was in Palestine recently, and he said, a woman here who wants to go to the store to get milk for her child, which is right there, which is maybe just 2 blocks away, has to walk 3 miles out of the way because it's just a way of keeping control in people. And so I was reading recently that the Indians in Arizona, in this particular area, have to travel. There's the neighbor right there. You can go right there. No, you must drive 70 miles that way, cross at the official border crossing, and come back up. Add insult to injury, now the National Guard are coming in, and what they're going to do is actually start building this wall. In other words, they're going to destroy the burial place of these people. And it goes on and on. In other words, you're beginning to see a kind of Bajanism, we could call the word, right? That was always there. And you have, you remember when they found, what's his name, O.J. Simpson, not guilty?
Yeah.
I was teaching school, and just these radical people. And when that announcement came on, I could not believe the people who were so angry. I said, well, you're supposed to be, no. This stuff shows its true color at a given time. Trump had to come.
Yeah.
After that wonderful delusion of our period with Obama that we thought was wonderful. He is wonderful. But what did you think was going to happen? That America would just take off the clothes and say, well, here you are, we owe you this? No, that's not going to happen. And you realize now that you have to be stronger than ever.
With that in mind, is there any double consciousness that you have in terms of allegiance to this country that we call the United States?
There's a question that came up with the poet Lucille Clifton.
Yes.
She got the prize, the Langston Hughes Prize, some years ago. And the question came up that when the World Trade Center crashed, okay, the loyalty that a lot of us had towards the movement, towards the revolution, came into question. Who is the real enemy? A lot of black people who were saying we stand against, white supremacy and so on, suddenly found themselves defending American rights because they felt that they had crossed the border and come into America. So suddenly you were black, but you're also on two sides,
exactly.
right? And this is the problem right here.
Yeah.
A little like Trump see this tape, huh? No, so I think that's part of the anxiety of the book. Again, how does one measure allegiance? Is it time, right? Because then that shifts. But I think that, in the previous panel, the term crisis of belonging was mentioned, and I think that I want to say the negotiation of belonging is maybe a more useful term for me, that we're constantly negotiating in what ways we belong to which space and for what reasons. And so there's an absolute allegiance to Trinidad. But I haven't lived here for 21 years. I can't believe it's 21 years. And so the place that I have lived and that has also given me so much, I owe a certain allegiance to, whether I like who's running it or not, right? So again, that complication of what one owes at what point in time to whom for what reason, it's something that you always have to negotiate, that you always have to return to, and that you have to question, because I think blind allegiance, or as our 45 likes to say, loyalty, is without question, without critical thinking, is dangerous. And so that's my answer to that question.
And you're in a critical position right now, because you have to decide whether you want to become a citizen. You don't give up your Trinidad citizenship, but you would take on a citizenship in the States. Let me put it out there. I want her to become a citizen of the United States because I want her to continue to work with me. However, I know there's some tension there. But
the question of citizenship becomes what I again aligned with what is being done in my name, right? But also, of course, what can I add to the conversation that I can't add right now, like a vote, right? And so I think it becomes again a complex question. And thank God for poetry. That's the space I get to work it out in as well.
I'm going to shift it a little bit. Mervyn, when I was reading your poetry, you so reminded me of Gwendolyn Brooks. Yes, because you have such an intimacy with place. Gwendolyn Brooks made the South Side of Chicago her oyster. She described it in such a way that even if you'd never lived there, you felt you were familiar with it. And you make me feel that way about Brooklyn. You do.
Yeah. Well, because Brooklyn is little Trinidad. It is. Brooklyn, if you live, this is the difference, I think, between Lauren and myself. You stayed a long time in the hinterland. Well, I call it the hinterland, which is what? Iowa? Iowa, right? If you live in Iowa, I think about those boys from the Sudan who came here as refugees. You remember? Where did they go to live? In Fargo or someplace, ice. 11 months of the year, it's ice, But if you live in Brooklyn, if you live near Prospect Park like I do, you can ask my friend Gabe right here, you're pretty much home. I have a friend who used to work at the airport, and he used to have to pass my intersection every morning going to work. He's going to work at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he makes sure, as he's coming under my window, he turns up Blue Boy or somebody loud under my, what you need here this morning? He's quizzing me on what I heard that particular morning. So he's waking me up. So calypso and the culture. There's not a Sunday morning you can walk down Ocean Avenue and don't smell callaloo. You don't smell callaloo in Trinidad much anymore, tell you the truth. But you smell callaloo in Brooklyn like crazy, yes. Yeah. It doesn't mean that I don't miss home, though. It doesn't mean that I don't get hungry for here. And every chance I get, well, there are people in this audience who would also attest to that, right? Coming home is just something else.
I'm coming home to Auntie Marge's curry crab. I'm coming back, Auntie Marge. You know, it is now time to open it up to questions from this wonderful audience. I've taught a long time, so I know you need about 30 seconds to come up with a question. So in the 30-second intermission, I will tell you about the wonderful Furious Flower Poetry Center. Furious Flower is at James Madison University. It will be 25 years old next year. We do everything for African American poets, promote them, advertise their work, research them, preserve their work. We do readings, we do poetry camps, we do seminars, we do collegiate summits. Alleyne even has a online journal, and this summer we'll inaugurate a poetry slam academy, a slam academy. So we are really, really busy doing poetry, especially Black poetry. So that's my 30-minute commercial, my 30-second commercial. A question from the audience. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for your lovely readings. Lauren.
Yes, ma'am.
Mervyn lives in the Little Caribbean, which is Little Haiti, Little Jamaica, as well as Little Trinidad, right? You live in Virginia. He's able to feed his longing for home, and his friends who drive past his house feed his longing for home. What do you do when you're in Virginia to feed your soul?
That's an interesting, and Virginia is, trust me, it's not that bad. When I left Trinidad, I went to New York, right? So, and I remember so distinctly, I had a friend who went to school in North Carolina, or South Carolina, and he was just like, Ola, don't even know. He's like, I'm in Orange, South Carolina. He's like, you didn't leave home, and I didn't know what he was talking about until I moved to Iowa, Ames, Iowa. I think that actually there's a connection between between the writing actually and that shift away from the center, in which it was super experiential. And when I lived in New York, and when I finally kind of figured out that writing poetry was something I wanted to do, I wasn't at all thinking about home or writing that. I wasn't writing that at all. And the minute I wound up in Iowa and away from everything familiar. I mean, it was so strange. Understanding Blackness for the first time in a completely different way. Again, we don't have that in New York. I mean, we were the largest cohort at my college from the Caribbean, like everybody. So it didn't really feel like leaving. But then going to Iowa, understanding, one, your Blackness is not the same as the other Blacknesses that exist, right? And then what that means within the context, that was, I write to figure out what's going on in my head, right? And so the writing, I think, started to take on some of those connotations, and certainly memory. I write a lot from recollection of home, and I think so I think that's what I do. I impose upon my mother to bring all sorts of things in her suitcase when she comes to visit. And my sister lives with me, so we also do that thing where they're like, oh, you're talking to your sister, aren't you? I'm like, yes, because my language immediately becomes something else. But I think, that's what I do.
Yes, right here. Oh.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm interested. It was really interesting to hear this poem. I enjoyed it. It made me feel like walking down Charlotte Street to buy stuff. When the hurricane was going up to the States last year. That's just when Trump won. I said, okay, my Trinidad self, why are these hurricanes going up to the States? I said, there's only one thing that they could be going up there for. Because during we Trinidad, and we play all fours. And in all fours, we'll play for Trump.
Don't ruin my favorite game.
So that's why when the hurricane was going to America, they're looking for Trump.
They voted for Trump. My gosh.
Hi. This is a question for both of you, but I want to start with Lauren. You mentioned appreciating form and working with form. So I was wondering about your relationship with form and the histories that are carried within the forms, and so how you negotiate those, the histories of the forms that you use, and I was interested in how each of you approaches structure, the architecture of your poems.
I love form because I know I was a science student in my previous life. I love the order of it, and I do love the way in which I think a form as a container, right? Something that can give shape to. Because again, I don't know what's going on up here until I start to write, and so finding the right container to figure out, like that villanelle. A villanelle is a form that repeats a line and it gets back to it and it gets back to it, right? So that turning over and over of like, oh God, I have to go to the people and embassy. I hope I have everything. Like that form lent itself to that kind of contemplation. So I guess that's the thing for me is finding the form, whether it's a fixed form or something that emerges more organically, that can carry what it is I'm trying to think about and can somehow move the reader in the same motion of my mind via the construct of the language. And most recently, I went to a seminar probably a month ago, and somebody gave a presentation on a blason, which was not a form I was familiar with. And you praise the beloved from her feet all the way up to her head in all of these ridiculous terms. And I was so fascinated. Actually, I have Joanne trying to write one on the plane. But it was so curious. So again, I like the challenge of form. Can I obey the rules and still get what I want done? And so the blason I wound up writing was a blason for the revolution, because I'm like, don't objectify women. No, we're going to take this, So I did it in a completely different way. So I also like to do that with form, which is take the received history of the form and Trinize it, Laurenize it, whatever you want to call it, make it my own, because again, that's the negotiation of anything, right? We always walk into some sort of received structure, and the temptation is to sort of just fit right into it, and my instinct is always to trouble it a little bit, just a little bit.
She told me about that form, and so I was writing it on the plane, and I said I wouldn't do my husband because I couldn't share that with her, but I did my daughter, and one line was, her buttocks are like a solar eclipse. She will not want to see this at all.
It's such an interesting form, because really what it does is it kind of picks apart the person, right? Your toes like this and your ankles like this, and it's meant to build up this ideal. So I thought, well, what other ideals am I interested in building that isn't some sort of objectified female, So yeah, I think, again, taking the form and making it cool.
Your turn, Mervyn.
I came into poetry kind of backwards through the idea of the folk poem. I was at Howard with Sterling Brown.
Yay!
And so basically I approached poetry from the idea of sound. And even before that, the idea of calypso. I had an uncle who ran the original Young Brigade Calypso tent. So at 7 and 9 years old, I was in the second row, not in the first, because first row is where you get picong and fatigue, but the second row. So all those early years, I was listening to Sparrow when I was that age and taking my friends to the tent. So that's my first idea of the lyric and of poetry. Form came much later with Derek and Brodsky and so on at Columbia. And I never let it be too much of a weight on me at all. That exercise you're talking about, I wouldn't do that if they paid me. But in other words, what would guide my poem? What would guide my poem is, and the same thing in the poem, going down Charlotte Street, just behind me, the woman yelled out, "Oh, you come now, man, buy the tomato now, and me and the tomato man make back." That's a poem right there. That's like a found poem, right? You can't do anything like that. I don't know what form you could put it in, but it's already, it's its own living, organic form, is what it is. Form works as a discipline, right? It helps you to organize your thoughts, to put things in place. But I am always wary of form that might interfere with the wings, with the wings. There you go.
Last night I got a tutorial on Calypso from none other than Dr. Andrew Lord Superior McConnell. What an amazing night we had. Dr. Janet Stanley McConnell hosted us, put on this fabulous party, and we got to hear him sing. And it was just amazing. So I agree with you. But the reason I did the chair just a minute ago when he mentioned Sterling Brown, that was one of the questions I was going to ask. I knew, because you were there at Howard during those years, that you knew the man that I slept with for 8 years.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Wait.
How we say in Trinidad? Mouth open, Tory jump out.
That's right. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Sterling Brown was my hero, my mentor. I did my dissertation on Sterling Brown. He became friend, father, mentor, and I did not literally sleep with him. I did not sleep.
She had to sleep with the books.
But did I get your attention? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. But I slept with him in terms of his mind, and I did have a dissertation that turned into the book, and it's called Sterling A. Brown, Building the Black Aesthetic, Southern Road, and to this day, I don't regret any moment that I spent studying this giant of a man. He was just incredible. So, questions?
Well, I have a question.
I shocked them all.
I have a question. Can I ask Mervyn a question? Because, again, it's so clear to see some of the influences, right? Brown and certainly Derek and Brooks. So, who are some of the writers that you find yourself writing toward and also writing against?
Well, I always kind of got tired of poems that try to be too assertive about certain things. Yeah, sorry. I always had a problem with writing that became too assertive about a certain stance, a kind of a righteous sounding kind of poetry. And I found it to be a little bit juvenile. It didn't take long for me to break out of that habit, because poetry is nothing if it doesn't question the very thing that it's talking about. At the same time that you're saying it, the question is there at the same time. I think I opted for people like Kira Petsiko-Sitsili, who just showed me out of his own South African language that so much was possible, right? That you could do in light of what's going on. What good when you hear the spear point pivoted in the marrow of the villain's brain? What good is a goddamn poem? That kind of openness of expression I got from him. Tony McNeil out of Jamaica, just amazing. We were born the same day, same time, same year. So they call that cosmic twins, is what we are. But what a brother. He was also, a small aside, you should never ask a poet to eulogize somebody at a funeral, right? The problem is that they will speak the truth. So Tony McNeil was eulogizing his aunt and started talking about how crazy she was, and of course the whole congregation is in shock and everybody's like, you're not supposed to say that,
Yeah.
But Tony, he couldn't help it. He's an honest and true poet. So who I like, I like people like Tony McNeil. Well, Derek Walcott, you can't escape him, even though he was not an easy taskmaster, of course, right? Who I don't like, I can't.
I think you answered that question.
Yes.
What you're not wanting to
Yeah,
write toward,
yeah.
that's the answer.
Yeah,
So
I'll
I
turn
think you
that
answered the
question on Lauren. Who is it for you?
I find myself often looking to a lot of female writers. So I think Lucille Clifton is one of the people I look to. Sharon Olds, there's a brutality of honesty in the work that Sharon Olds produces that I find fascinating. I try to be that brave. And I think there's so many. I think of Cornelius Eady's. I love persona poems because you get to be yourself and someone else at the same time. And I'm a Gemini, so I love that. And so the idea of how to use the mask to say something that the I can't say, and at the same time that the I wants to say, but just uses the mask to do it. I think he's masterful with that in Brutal Imagination. So I guess the other thing is I like books more than poets. I like books, and certain books do certain things for me. So yeah, those are the people that come easily to mind.
Another question.
Yes, one more question. Thank you. I want to ask both poets, how much weight would you give to the perception that the reader might have that you are both translators of the spaces you inhabit, Trinidad and the US? So how much weight do you give to us seeing you as translators for the two spaces? Because the American reading the poetry about Trinidad is learning something, and when we read or listen to the poems that you do about things that are happening in America, we are getting a translation of a kind because you're telling us things that we don't know. So how much weight do you give to that responsibility that we perceive?
I think all poetry is a kind of translation, right? It's what I tell my students, that what you're doing is, I always tell them, close your eyes, take a look at the inside of your own head. And you're trying to give that to somebody in some sort of coherent fashion, right? So we're always translating in the poem, the interior landscape to some sort of language, to some sort of meaning that you might not even have made yet. And certainly that applies to place, right? But I'm also translating for myself, right? When you go into a different space, and in order to understand it, you sort of have to relate it to another place that you know. And so that work of making the connection is part of what happens in the poem, I think. So I think, yes, I think I don't know that the responsibility per se, I'm not doing it to say I am the poetic ambassador for Trinidad to America, but certainly I'm the poetic ambassador for myself. And I hope that it is useful, that I've created some sort of a pathway that somebody else, if they need it, can follow and find.
I think you find an affinity in the world with people from wherever. I don't know if there's a common thing that makes me say I represent or I interpret for Trinidad and Tobago. We're as different as individuals. Everybody is different. I may be even more similar to an American friend than I am to somebody living down the block from me in Belmont. There are different personalities and different arrangements of thought, right? But at the same time, I want to be able to interpret what Trinidad means to me, what it means to me. And it probably doesn't mean the same to everybody. I've met people here in my own community who I say, you sure you're from here? You know, it doesn't strike me that you're from here. So the idea of, say, all are we is one family, that's a great sentiment, right? But it doesn't always hold true. It doesn't always hold true anywhere. And each man, each woman has to forge that way, and I think that's what poetry is. Poetry is the spade or the plow that will take you through to where you get a deeper understanding of people, wherever they are, here, there, China, any place. Find your own space. I don't speak for anyone.
I love the idea of family to just be, hello? I love the idea of family too, just because always one family is great if we let go of the idea that a family is a coherent, cohesive, perfect unit that doesn't have any complications, difference, or diversity. So we can be a family, but understand this, that's so. I think that's the other thing. I love what you said, that there's all sorts of affinities. It's sort of back to the original question, that we find spaces and language to create affinity that where it didn't exist, or to reinforce affinity where it already is, and that we keep finding each other in unexpected places. Hopefully, that's what the poetry allows us to do for each other.
One of the things you realize about the immigration or the immigrant experience is that people get to meet people that they would not have met if they had not left where they were. For example, I have seen in Brooklyn a Dominican and a Haitian become this close where they would not have had that opportunity back in Hispaniola. You understand? They begin to find different. You have to survive. If you meet an enemy in some territory that is dangerous, you can make a friendship and forget all the old things. I have a poem that talks about the big flood that we had here in Trinidad last year, right? And about a man who has an enemy and he's going looking for him with a cutlass to kill him. But when he gets to the house, the man is looking to kill a snake under his bed. So the man who is his enemy helps him kill the snake under his bed. The circumstance makes the difference, right?
Even with the challenges of the age of Trump, as far as I see it, the poet has at least one responsibility, and that is to speak the truth to the people and to do it beautifully. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Now, exercise. Let's do this in the Furious Flower way. Let's give a rousing applause and thank you to our poets.